Hello everyone. Welcome to today's live stream for getting started in web design. My name is Dan Rodney. I'll be your instructor for this webinar. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Noble Desktop, we're based in New York City, but we teach both live online classes and you can take classes in person in New York City. And we teach people how to design and code for a wide variety of different things. But one of the things we teach is web design, which is why you're here for this presentation. So a lot of this is going to be live demonstration where I'm going to be showing you how to do things. But before I dive into that, I want to give just a little bit of context of kind of what goes into building a website and the design part, the coding part. So this presentation, there's just a few slides here. This link will be in the video description down below. If you're watching this video on YouTube, just look in that video description, but you can also go there in your browser to nobledesktop.com/presentation/webdesign and the number 4. A couple things in here. There is an exercise PDF. So this is a step-by-step exercise, which is going to walk you through the coding portion of what I'm going to demonstrate tonight. So later, if you want to practice this and go through all the code and everything that I'm talking about, you can download that PDF, either put it off to the side of your screen so you can follow the instructions, or you can print it out if you want to. That's up to you. But everything is in there step by step. It'll tell you how to go onto our website and download some files that you'll be able to use. And everything is there step by step. Tells you to go get your code editor with Visual Studio Code, to open the file, type in the code, and everything step by step. And this is actually how we prepare training material for our classes. So when you're taking our classes either live online or in person, we write these exercises for a wide variety of our classes. Every class has these, but most of our coding classes do have these. So this is there for your reference, that link right there. And this presentation link stays up, so you don't have to worry about it going away. The PDF exercise will be there, and it has the download code for downloading the class files in that. When you're going through the slides here in the presentation, you can use the arrow buttons down here at the bottom right, or you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard as it's mentioned here. If you're on a touch screen, you can also swipe back and forth as well. So just let me go through a couple slides here, talk about some things, and then I will dive in and actually show you the process of creating a website. So when you think about web design and you're thinking about getting into designing or building websites, the term web design, if somebody says they're a web designer, it's kind of hard for me to know whether they do the design and graphics side of things or the coding side of things. Some people will do one or the other, or some people will do both. For me, I like to do both things. I like to design and build the graphics for websites, and I also like to code the websites and make them function as well. It's not that everybody has to do both sides of things, although I do think that designers that know some code are better because they understand the process of how their design gets turned into code, and they understand why they're doing certain things better. Even if they're not the one that's coding everything, it will help them. So web design is a very broad term, but ultimately what goes into building a website or designing a website is that you're going to need a design. You need a plan before you go ahead and actually build that website. Kind of like if you're going to build a building, you don't just start slapping up 2x4s and hoping that it all will stay up and it won't fall down. So same thing with doing a website. You want to design the website, plan it out, think about what content's going to go where, what pages are you going to have, what's the flow going to be like going from one page to another. There's going to be graphics that will need to be designed, so there needs to be design and visual elements. Sometimes they call this web design, sometimes they call it UI or visual design. Different terms go into that. And then to make it function, once you have that plan, once you have that design, someone is going to need to code that website and to make it function. I'll be talking about this a little bit later, showing you how the code works. And by the end of this live stream, you will have seen a website be made, go live, and you can actually go there on the internet to see it. For those of you who are attending live later, it may not still be up, but you'll see the whole process from start to finish, because instead of me just talking about it, me actually showing you, it's gonna connect with you better, so that you'll be able to understand it and not just kind of like, oh, vague terms of like, just I want to show you. It's going to make more sense. But before I start that, let me just go through a couple things here. So when it comes to the coding side, by the way, sometimes people will lump this in with general web design, but whenever you see somebody say they're a web developer is definitely somebody that codes. So a web designer could be somebody that designs and codes, or somebody that just designs. So I don't really know what they're doing until I clarify, okay, so what exactly do you do in web design? All right, so I'm going to turn off my webcam there and focus on the presentation here. So one thing about coding is that even as a web designer, even if you don't plan on coding and building your websites, at least understanding how that code works, even if you don't intend to code, will make you a better designer. And also, when you're applying to jobs, if you can design and you know something about code, it's going to make you a better job applicant. And this is not just my words. This is from Fast Company, an article that they wrote, and I fully agree with it. But just so you're not just listening to me, other people are backing up what I've always said to people, that designers who at least understand code are going to do better design. I think it would be hard, in my opinion, to know all the things that you want to do and the reasons why, if you don't at least somewhat have an idea of how code works. I don't think the same is true necessarily for doing things like app design, but for web design is something that the coding is easy enough that you can get into a little bit, become somewhat familiar with the code, and you never know, you might actually like it. Some people that have thought, I don't really want to get into code, they start getting into it and they're like, hey, I can actually do this. And they kind of get excited and they're like, yeah, I didn't think I could do this, but I can. And then they get into it. So there are different types of coding. There's what we call front-end coding, back-end coding. The easier one is front-end coding. Back-end coding does get a bit more technical. And so the front end is more the kind of the visual things that you're going to see happening in a browser. So there's different types of coding languages. One is called HTML. I'll be showing you this in just a little bit, showing you how to code some HTML. HTML is going to mark up or label. It's called a markup language. So the ML part, this is hypertext markup language. When you are marking up or labeling things, you're basically saying, this is a paragraph, this is a heading, this is an item that's going to be in a list. So you're going to have tags that label things. So it's basically a label language. And there is some technical, like, got to make sure you have some less than, greater than signs in the right places, and quotes around certain things. You got to use the right names, but it's basically labeling things. So it's not super high-end programming with weird abstract concepts. It's very direct, and you're basically labeling things. Then you take that content that you've labeled, those headings, those paragraphs, and you use CSS. CSS is cascading style sheets. That's how you style the content. So together, HTML is your content, and your CSS styles that content. And if you want to put interactivity and animation and logic behind it, that's what JavaScript is. Now, of these, HTML and CSS are the more visual things, and if you're more of a designer, these are kind of the areas that you'll kind of most be interested in. And then the JavaScript does get a bit harder. It gets a bit more technical. It's a bigger language. It involves all the other parts as well as itself. And so that's more kind of programming, whereas this is kind of more what I like to call coding, which I'll explain in just a moment. But your interactivity, your animation, your logic is all done with JavaScript. The cool thing is that once you learn HTML, CSS, you can use it in websites, but also it's used in a lot of things. Emails are coded with HTML and CSS. Ebooks are actually like a little website zipped up into a file called .epub, and an EPUB is basically HTML and CSS when you open it up. It's like a folder that you can unzip, and even some applications are based on web technologies. Apps are going to typically more go towards the HTML, CSS, and especially the JavaScript. So they might have some HTML, CSS elements, but they're going to definitely use JavaScript because they're more kind of logic-based and programming features and stuff. But the point is, you can get a lot of mileage out of your knowledge of HTML and CSS if you learn it. You can use it for all sorts of things. And if you want to learn it, I think that if you put your mind to it, you can. Especially things like HTML and CSS. They're not super high-level programming. They're easier things to get into. And so it's not just for the uber computer geeks out there. And to me, there's two types of things. There's what I like to call coding and programming. Coding is easier. A code represents something. So we're going to see in a little bit that there's P stands for paragraph. That's technically code, right? P stands for paragraph. It's not literally paragraph. It just says the letter P. And you can do a UL for an unordered list or an OL for ordered list. So there's these little tags or codes. It's not high-level programming where you're creating algorithms and things. Those are programming concepts. So JavaScript is more of a programming language, whereas HTML and CSS are coding languages. So HTML and CSS are much easier to learn. And but at the same time, you never know. You can work your way up to JavaScript. For me, I thought at one point, JavaScript is too hard. I'll just stick to HTML and CSS. But then once HTML and CSS got easy for me, I then started taking a look at JavaScript again. It didn't seem as hard as it first did when I first got started, and now I can teach JavaScript. So it's just a matter of stepping stones. HTML and CSS are the first stepping stone that you want to start with, and then move into JavaScript. And whenever you're learning any coding language, I think an important thing to understand about learning to code is that you want to focus on the concepts of how things are working. There's going to be a lot of memorization of specific ways to write things, which is called syntax. And that memorization, it just comes with practice. You just got to code and code and code. You just got to code a lot. The more you code, the more you'll practice it. And that memorization, eventually you'll just, because you've done it so many times, you'll just remember it off the top of your head. So when you're first learning, don't stress about the exact syntax. You can always look up the syntax of like, oh, what was the exact name for that? Or where was the parenthesis or the quote on that? But if you focus on the concept of how things work, that will allow you to understand how things are working. And the syntax will just come with practice. So you just got to get started doing it, and eventually that memorization will happen and it'll become second nature at some point. So don't be hard on yourself and think, oh, I need to memorize this right away, and if I forget something, woe is me. That's okay. Just know that the more you do it, the memorization will come as you practice it. So in terms of the technology stack here of a website, there is you looking at a website, which is actually what you're doing right now. You are looking at a website right here. I'm in a web browser. I'm in Google Chrome. When you are looking at a web browser, you're looking at what's called the front end of a website. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, like I said. HTML being your content, CSS styling that content. At a bare minimum, that's what you'd want for a web page. But a lot of people are going to put in JavaScript to make it animated or interactive, to create logic, like to test a form, to make sure that you put in the right type of content into the form. In this slide deck is powered by JavaScript. You're seeing HTML here in terms of like the heading and the paragraphs. It's styled with CSS, but to get these slides to work, to animate from one slide to the other, that requires JavaScript. So this is all happening in the browser, what we call client-side or front-end coding. And this is the easier side of things. Now, when you go towards the back end, the server side of things. So you've got client side, which is your browser, and server side. The server side, that gets more technical. It's things like WordPress, which is written in a computer language called PHP. It's a coding language. There is also things like Ruby on Rails, which is another coding language, which does a similar type of thing to PHP. And JavaScript used to be just something that worked in a web browser. But because a lot of people learned JavaScript to work in a web browser, they wanted to use it on the server as well. So in the beginning, we had things like PHP that's been around for a long time. Eventually, Ruby came out with Ruby on Rails, and then and more recently, although it's been quite a while that JavaScript has been on the server, JavaScript now, you can learn one language and you can use it for both front end as well as back end. And if you put these two together, we have what's called the full stack. So the full stack is all the way from the front to the back end. And it's very in vogue right now to be considered a full stack developer. But I found that a lot of people that say they're full stack developers are not front end developers. They basically can't do front end at all. They basically are back end developers. And it kind of annoys me that they call them full stack developers just because they want to seem better than they are. It's okay to say you're a front end developer or you're a back end developer. If you say you're a full stack, I think you should be able to equally do both the front end and the back end. So full stack is everything. Don't feel like you have to know everything. For me, I focus on the front end. I'm familiar with the back end, but I am not a back end developer. I am a front end developer. I will work with back end developers. And that's the thing. On a lot of projects, you're going to be one person in a team, and so you don't have to know everything. You can do your part and work with other people that can do the other parts, so you can work together on projects. So today, I'm just going to be focusing on the HTML and CSS side, showing you how to kind of design and plan a website, and then build it, upload it, make it go live, so you see the whole process encapsulated in a short amount of time here. And obviously there's going to be a lot of little details that I'm going to skip over just for the sake of keeping things simple and moving through, because I want you to be able to see an entire website get made so you see the process instead of just hearing about the process, because it'll just make it more real and more tangible. So the first step in creating a website is not to just build it. You don't just go right into code and start making the website. That's like just slapping up 2x4s and hoping your building doesn't fall down. First, you need to have a plan. You want to make sure that it's going to have a good flow from page to page. This involves things like user experience design. So UX design is about doing things like user research and user testing, where you find out what's important to people, and then you do some rough designs, typically called wireframes. And maybe then you take those wireframes, which kind of show somebody, whether it's a client or a potential user, what your plan is, what your design is. You can then actually do some user testing and have them kind of go through your website and see, are there any problems? Did they misunderstand something? Did they try to go to the wrong place? Did they not find something? And then once you have a good flow for the website, then you can refine the design, make it nice, choose your fonts and your colors, and put everything together, which is more called the UI or visual design. Those are the tight designs. So from UX to UI design, it's all designing how the website's going to work, where the content's going to go, how it's going to look. And these are the apps that people are using to do this side of things. So Sketch has been around for the longest. It's a Mac-only app, and all of these are good apps. There's no bad apps in this bunch here. And I should say that, years and years ago, people would use things like Photoshop and Illustrator, and there are still some people that are using Photoshop and Illustrator, but these are the kind of modern website and app designs, and these are apps that are created for doing digital design, whether it's websites or apps or whatever. So out of all of these, Sketch kind of was the first kind of early runner, and it's a Mac-only app because a lot of designers do use Macs. It does not work on Windows, and as far as I know, they're not really planning on bringing it out for Windows. I would be very surprised if they come out with a Windows version of it. But it's a good design program, but it focuses mostly on visual design, and it doesn't have a lot of prototyping functionalities. Prototyping is how you can build a working prototype, a clickable thing that people can go through and do some user testing on, and actually like tap through or click through to see what the website's going to actually do. You're not building the website, you're just building something that looks like the website for the most part. You're planning it out, doing stuff without having to code, just using visuals to do it. So Sketch is more strong on the visual design side, doesn't have as much of the prototyping features. You'd have to use a separate app like InVision to do more. It has some prototyping features built in. Whereas Figma and Adobe XD, they are both strong on both doing visual design and prototyping, and they even do some animation as well built in. Figma is a web app, and so you can use that either in a web browser, or there is a desktop app that still requires the internet, but there's a desktop app you can install. It basically works just like the website does, just kind of like a full screen browser, if you will. But Figma is a web app that you can use. Figma has a starter free plan that you can use. It actually does quite a lot, but when you need some additional features, there's paid plans for Figma. Adobe XD also has a free starter plan as well. a limited starter plan, and when you need more features, again, you can also pay. Pretty similar pricing for both of those. And Figma got a head start on Adobe XD, and because it's a web app, you can use it on any platform, so it kind of got an early lead. So I would say in terms of the number of people using it, Figma and Sketch are kind of the two most used right now. Adobe XD, because it was the latest one, it's coming on strong. It's got a lot of great features, and it really competes very well with Figma in terms of features, but just not as many people are using it, which is kind of surprising because a lot of people use the Adobe Creative Cloud, so they're used to using Adobe apps, and it's included with the Creative Cloud. So if you're a Creative Cloud user, you'll probably find Adobe XD more intuitive and easier to use. But you really can't go wrong with any of these. They're all good, but I would say in terms of features, Figma and Adobe XD are definitely the strongest one. Sketch is starting to fall behind in terms of features. You got the juggernaut of Adobe, and Figma just got a head start. So they have quite a few features there. So today I'll be showing Figma, just because you can sign up for a free plan, do it all in your browser. There's not even anything to install. So I'll be showing Figma today for the design side of things. So let me show you that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how to turn the design into an actual website and make it function and everything. So I'm going to go to this other browser tab here, and I'm just going to go to the, I've just logged into figma.com basically. So I of course have an account. I've signed into my account, and so at figma.com here, I can see I've got a little project created over here, and I've already got a file started. Now, when you start out a file, when you want to design, you'll be creating a new design file. So I'll click New Design File just to kind of show you some of the basics here. With everything tonight for this this webinar, it's going to be just high level kind of main ideas here. I know there's lots of subtle things. There's lots of things to learn, but I want to encapsulate the whole general process here. So I'm not going to get too deep dive into any one particular area, but just give you kind of the big picture of the process here. When I'm in here, there are frames, and frames are like your other programs call them artboards, but your frame is kind of like your page size. So if I choose my frame, you're going to put a frame on the page here, and so there's lots of different presets here. So you can do phone sizes if you want to design for a phone size, tablets, desktops, and just to keep this simple, I'm going to do a desktop size. I think either the desktop or iMac size here, 1280 to 1440, I think those are a good range to start with in terms of the width. The height doesn't really matter, because as you add content, you'll just make your artboard, or in this case they call them a frame, taller. So let's say I just click on iMac here, just because I'm on a little bit of a smaller screen for this webinar, so this will fit on my screen a little bit better. You can name your frame by double clicking on the name up here and just call this my desktop design. And maybe this is my home page design, right? So I'll call it home page and desktop. When designing a responsive website, you'd also want to design the mobile version as well, which would require another artboard, and you'd kind of plan out, hey, how's it going to look like on a mobile phone? How's it going to look like on a desktop? And then you could also do a tablet for in between as well. And then onto this frame, you can do things like bring images in, so you can use a rectangle, draw out a box here, and then you can place images into it. You go place image, and then choose an image and click on that to place an image in. You can create text, so I can use my type tool there and click here and say this is some text, and I'll select that text. Go over here, you can choose from your fonts that are here, go to your type size, make it bigger so that we can actually see that, like so. That's a funky font. So you can design this how you like, change your color of your type, and design this however you see fit. So you'd go through and like I said, I'm going to keep things high level here today, but you would design how you want this to look. So I'm going to go back to my files. So I'll go back to files here, and there's that untitled document that I just created, but I'm going to open up this one, which is kind of like a good chef. I prepared things ahead of time. I'm going to double click on that to open up that file here. So I've already placed in a photo, done some type styling. I've kept this design very simple intentionally, because I want to show you how to code it and in just a short amount of time. So I kept it very simple. Just one single column, not doing multiple columns, just 2 graphics, 1 logo up here, and let me zoom in. If I go up here to the view menu here, I can zoom in a little bit on this. I'm going to hold my space bar to slide around within my design here so you can see this better. So I brought in my logo, which I did by placing an image in to bring in my logo. I put in some text here for a little nav bar and placed in this photo as well. And I've got some text down here. And there's different styling. So this has a color and it's all caps. This is bold, whereas this is regular. This is a gray versus black. So intentionally simple styling here so that we can actually build this pretty quickly. But this is my design. And so once you have your plan, once you have your design, and obviously you'd be building other pages, which would be other frames. So if I just zoom out here a little bit. So let's go and zoom out. If I was building another page, let's say I want to start with this page and duplicate it and just change out some content, I could select that and go in and say, hey, I want to go in and duplicate that. So this is the little Figma menu over here where you get all your functions, because you are in a web browser, so you can't go to your browser menu. And I can duplicate that. And now I got a whole other page, and maybe this is going to be like an about page. And so then instead of, hi, I'm Dan Rodney, then over here maybe I say about Dan Rodney, and then I can have some other text. I could change out the image that's there, and so on and so on. All right. So I'm not going to actually build that out, so I'm just going to click on that and delete it for right now. All right. So let's zoom back in there. Zoom in. All right. So I've got a plan. I know what I want to build. And this process that can, for a small website, can take maybe a short amount of time. For a bigger website, will take a long time. How complex the site is going to determine how long that process takes. So, but you'll have to go through and design. And whether it's Figma or Adobe XD or Sketch, if you're going to get into web design, you'll need to learn one of these design apps. But fundamentally, they all work very similar to each other. The other apps just call frames artboards instead. Once you have your plan, the text that we have, that's all going to become real text. So once that ends up going into our code, in the web page itself, that will all be selectable, like real live text. So I know what type styling I want to do. I know what fonts, I know what colors now, but when it comes to the graphics, I need to export those graphics so that I can use them in my code. Because code can have text, but when it comes to an image, it just has to say, hey, bring in this file. So I need to make one file for the logo and one file for the photo. And what Figma will do is it'll take the name of your layer over here on the left. So like, I'm just going to call this logo. And then over here, photo, that's probably too generic. I could call this my homepage main photo, right? Or sometimes they call these hero photos. I call them a hero. So that's going to be a good name. Now, when naming things, eventually these are going to become files. And on the web, we want to keep our file names with no spaces and everything lowercase. I'll talk more about this when we actually code this up. But just to keep everything easy for file naming purposes when it comes to actually putting it into the live website, just keep everything lowercase and don't use spaces, use a dash. You could use an underscore, but most people use dashes because you only have to hit one key. Underscores require holding shift, so it's easier if you don't use underscore. So most people just use dashes instead of spaces. Once you have a good name over there, then on the right-hand side, we can tell it to export that. And I can click the plus button, and I can choose the format that I want to export it as. There's a set of formats here, and when you are exporting what are called vector graphics, we choose SVG. So vector graphics are things that come in from, let's say, Adobe Illustrator, or icons that you might download online that are already SVG. But SVG is a scalable vector graphic, and it's the kind of graphic that it's created from. So the vector graphics, you can make them any size you want. You can make it big or small, and it's always crisp and clean and beautiful. And so we want to make sure we maintain those vectors And so we're going to export an SVG, a scalable vector graphic. And then I can click the export button, and that will export that. So it downloads it into my downloads folder. For something like a photo, when I export that, so I'm going to select this, and looks like I already had the export format there, so let me just remove that. So normally when you have a photo in there, it won't have that export over there. So I'm going to click the plus button. And for a photo, generally speaking, JPEG is going to be the best. So JPEG, if you have a digital camera, you likely have downloaded a JPEG from your digital camera. And so JPEG is just going to be the best at optimizing a photographic type imagery. And again, I can click the export button, and it downloads it into my downloads folder. So if I go ahead and show that my desktop here, there's my downloads. So there's my logo, and here's my photo. So once you have your final graphic, or I should say graphics, your JPEGs, your SVG files, you're going to want to get organized. You're going to want to put them into a folder for your website so that you can start to code up the website. And so when it comes to organizing your website, you want to make a folder for your website, right? And you can call this whatever you want. You can put it wherever you want, doesn't matter. So you have a folder for your website, and you're going to want to put all your files into that folder. So ultimately, you always have everything for a website all neat and organized in one folder. Try to give everything good names right from the beginning, because as you start to link to files, you're going to link to things based on their name. And if you have to change the name later, it means you're going to have to search and replace throughout your whole website to change those. So if you can just name it from the beginning the way you want it to be named, that's going to make your life easier. Now you're going to get a lot of files in here, and if you didn't create any subfolders, this would just be a mess of files. So at least for images, you would take your images and you would put those into a subfolder. And normally people either call this subfolder, they call it images, or just simply IMG for short. So it's up to you what you want to call that. It's not any special reserved name or anything, but just put all your images together into one place. And that way, separately from your images, you'll be able to have all your web pages and stuff sitting out here in the main folder of your website. In the PDF exercise that was in the first slide that you can download, there's a link to download some files. Let me show you those files that you can download. So I'm going to open this up here. So it's this Getting Started in Web Design. And there's a finished website, just in case you want to look at the finished code that we end up producing. But the beginner website here, this is that folder that I talked about. So it's a good idea to create a folder somewhere on your computer with everything for your website. In there, I already have an images folder. And in there, I have a home.jpg, and that's the home graphic. And then I've got a contact.jpg. So we're going to make, I'm going to show you how to make a two-page website, one with a home page and a second page with a contact page, just so you can see that you can link between the two pages. And then I also have the logo. Apple does a weird job here of previewing SVG files. It's not actually a problem with the SVG, it's just Apple does weird previewing. This is actually a transparent graphic with no background, and I don't know why they put all this empty white space there. But I've got my SVG logo, I've got my photos, and basically I've got my plan. I know what I want to do when it comes to building the site. The next step really is then to build the website. All right, so let me bounce back over to my presentation here and continue on. For coding, you're going to need some program that can help you do the coding. And there are dedicated programs for coding. And the most popular one is Visual Studio Code. It's made by Microsoft, and it's available for Mac and PC. And it's free, and it's in my opinion, definitely the best one. I've used many code editors over the years, from things like BBEdit to Dreamweaver for a while, years ago, to Sublime Text, and Visual Studio Code is the latest one, and it's definitely the best one. It's what we recommend using, and it's free. So the price is right, and once this was introduced, just over a matter of just a few years, they just took over the industry by storm. Just tons of add-ons and great features, and it's a really great code editor. So you can download this for both Mac and PC. So it's free. You'll want to get that, and that's where you're going to write your code, your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, whatever coding languages you're writing. Today, I'll be showing you some HTML and some CSS. So let me show you how to actually do that coding. So I've already installed Visual Studio Code, that free code editor. So I'm just going to open that up here. Now, when you first get started, you're going to want to have a new file to work on in your web folder. So it's actually a good practice to open up the web folder itself in your code editor. So on the Mac, I could just do, actually they do give you an open folder, although on the Mac you can say open, and you can open up files or folders, either one. On Windows, you have to do open folder to open a folder. So just to make it look like you would do on both Mac and PC, let me just show you file, open folder. So I want to open a folder because remember, your website is going to be a folder of files. So I'm going to open that folder. And on my desktop, I have my files. So this is my website right here. I'm going to open that up. The first time you open files, by the way, it might ask you if you want to trust those files, and you can say yes, you want to trust those files, because as you're developing, of course, you're going to trust your files that you're making, but just in case you were opening up somebody else's files that maybe you didn't trust, and then you're going to run that code, Visual Studio Code just confirms that you definitely want to trust those. So I've already trusted files that are on my desktop. But if you're opening up Visual Studio Code for the first time, opening up a folder for the first time in a certain location, it'll probably ask you to say that you trust those files. Over here in the sidebar, I now see a list of the folders that I can open up, and I can actually click on the images if I want to see those images again. And I can also open up files. Now, in this case, this file here is just a plain text file. There's nothing special in here. There's no HTML yet in this. So this is just a basically plain text file. The way we created it was creating a new file and saving it as, so just save as, and saving it as, in this case, index.html. Why index.html? A couple things. So first of all, the .html extension says that it's an excuse me, says that it's an HTML file. Functionally speaking, it's just like a plain text file. Like if I rename this and rename it txt, excuse me, functionally, obviously you don't want to put a txt file in your browser, so that wouldn't be a web page anymore. But just think of this as, it's not a rich text file, it's not a Word document, it's just a normal plain text file. So there's nothing special about an HTML page, it's just text, that's all it is. We're going to put special text in there, special codes, but it's just a plain text file, that's all it is. It's just a plain text file that has a different extension of .html. Now, why index? Well, we're going to get lots of different web pages. Eventually, we'll get a contact, and maybe there's a shop and other different pages with different names. Out of all of those pages, how does a website know which is your very first page? Because when you go to nobledesktop.com, for example, it's going to automatically choose one of those pages. So index is a reserved name. It's a reserved file name, and that is for your homepage. Out of all the files, the website knows to choose index.html for your homepage. So that's a special name that you want to use for your homepage. For other pages, you can use whatever other names you want. So you can have an about.html, a contact.html, but your homepage has to be called index.html. And if you think about a book, if you think about looking something up in a book, to find things in a book, the index is where you look. And the index page on a home site is kind of where you look to find things on the website. It's where you start. So it kind of makes sense. In here is where you're going to write all of your HTML. So HTML it's a tag-based language. You're going to use less than and greater than brackets. And in those less than and greater than brackets, you're going to put tags like the HTML tag. I'm going to hit my Command plus to zoom in. On Windows, you can do Control as well. So Command plus and minus make your code bigger and smaller. On Windows, Control plus and minus make it bigger and smaller. So this is a tag. Now, tags normally wrap around things. They say, I'm going to start something and I'm going to end it. And they wrap around the thing that they're describing. We want everything in this page to be considered HTML. So I'm going to start my HTML up here. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to copy and paste that down here. And let's just delete that for a second. The start and end tag are almost exactly the same, except the end has a slash. The slash denotes the end of something. So that says the HTML is done. This tag says it starts, and then it says all of the stuff inside of the tag is HTML. Now, HTML pages are broken down into two sections. There's a head and there's a body. Think about which you think goes on top. Just picture a person. You got a head and you got a body. So I'm going to create a new tag. Again, tags are in these less than, greater than brackets. Now, as you're in a code editor typing, Visual Studio Code is going to try to help you. So when I open up the tag and I start typing, notice how it auto-completes and says, oh, head or header. I don't want header, although I can use my arrow keys to choose which one I want. It even gives you a little description of what that thing is. That's nice. If you want to learn more about it, you can click this. This is the Mozilla Developer Network. Mozilla is the body behind Firefox. So if you've ever used the Firefox browser, Mozilla is the company that develops it. It's the organization, I should say, that develops it. And they have a developer network of all sorts of useful reference that talks all about different web technologies and different tags and how they work. It's kind of like a dictionary of different coding languages, and it's great. So you can click that link to go out if you want to learn more about these. But just using my up and down arrow keys, I can choose which tag I want to write. And if I hit return, it will complete that tag. Then I can close the tag, and when I do, Visual Studio Code will actually automatically add the ending tag. Now, it might not always be where you want it to be. So for example, if I delete these for a second and I delete this down here, when I'd open this up here, if I would use the, let's type this all over again. So HT, and notice it wants to complete HTML. If I hit return and I close it, it's going to end it right there. Now, I don't want to end it there. So they figure, well, hey, we already ended it, so you can just cut it and paste it where you want it to be. So if you don't want it there, you can cut it, go somewhere else, and paste the end. Anything inside that tag is marked up to be said, this is all HTML. And we're going to create two sections. We're going to create a head. So I start typing head, hit return, close the tag. And so the opening tag is done. Now I've got the closing tag done. Down below that, I'm going to create a body. So we got the head and we got the body. The body is going to be wrapped around all of your content. So the body is the part of the page that you see. The head is kind of the invisible stuff you don't see that goes on behind the scenes, kind of like I don't see what goes on in your head when I'm talking to you, but I can see your body, right? So the body is the bulk of the page. That's where you put all your content, your text, your images. People are going to see what's in the body. They normally don't see most of the stuff that goes on in the head. There is an exception, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, but for the most part, you put all your content in the body. There you go. I just made a web page. Very simple web page, and I'm going to add to it, but for right now, I'm going to save. So I'm going to save that file. And I want to open it up in a web browser. So let me clarify. A browser, a web browser, a lot of people don't really know what a web browser is. They might think Google is a web browser. Well, Google Chrome is. Google.com is a website that you view in a web browser. So a web browser is an HTML, CSS, JavaScript rendering application. So it's going to render all of these tags. You are going to see the result of these tags. These tags are going to talk to the web browser and tell it to do things. They're kind of like commands for the browser. So Google Chrome, Firefox, Apple Safari, Microsoft Edge, which used to be called Microsoft Internet Explorer. So all of these are just browsers that render HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you see the result of it. They are desktop apps that can read files, HTML files, that are either on the internet or on your local computer. So I can go into Chrome and I can show you HTML pages that are on somebody else's computer, or I can open a file on my computer. Like I can literally go to File, Open. Now you would never do this as a normal person, but as a web developer, This is normal for web developers because I have a local file on my computer. It's not sitting on the internet yet. Eventually it will. I'll have to put it out there on the internet so everybody else can see it. But for right now, I'm just literally going to open a file from my computer, just like you would open a Microsoft Word document. I'm going to go and like navigate to where my file is and open it. And you're going to see the result of what those codes tell the browser to do. Now, if you're on Windows, you don't have that little top menu bar. You can always just do Control-O to open, or the other way to open it is, the easiest way, is drag and drop. Just go to your desktop, and from your desktop, you can take your file and simply drag and drop it onto the browser. Easiest way to open it up. Notice that you're getting a file path, not the normal web address that you're used to. And that's because this is literally a file on your computer. Like on my computer in a users folder under Dan on my desktop is this file. So now what you're seeing here might not be exactly what you thought you would see, because if we compare this to what I have here in Visual Studio Code, and just temporarily I'm going to hide this sidebar. This is called the Explorer. I'm going to click on this button here just to hide the Explorer. I can always open it back up again, just so that I can put these side by side so you can see them both at the same time. Okay. Notice that in here, all these returns, these empty spaces, did not translate into the browser. Browsers, when they're reading code, don't care about extra spaces. They'll render one space, but anything more than one space, like returns and stuff, it completely ignores all of that stuff. So just as an example here, like if I put all of these things on different lines like this, notice none of that makes a difference there in the browser. So when you make a change, let's say, hi, I'm Dan Rodney, exclamation. By the way, you have to save your file, and then you have to come back to your browser. And it's not going to automatically update unless you hit the reload button. When you hit reload, or Command R on the Mac, or Control R on Windows, when you hit that reload button, that's when it's going to go and reload the latest version of the page. So any change you make, you got to make the change, save the change that you've done, and then come to the browser and hit refresh so you can reload that. Okay, so hitting return in the code does not hit return in the browser. We need to give it more tags, tags that explain what these things are, like P for paragraph. So P, we're going to wrap this around, and what is in the tags is going to be marked up to say this is a paragraph. So that ending tag, that has to be moved, cut and pasted, so that it's wrapped around the paragraph. So like this is one paragraph, and then this is going to be another paragraph. Cut and paste. So I'm wrapping those tags around, and it's saying this is a paragraph because I've started the paragraph and then I've ended the paragraph. So anything inside is marked up. It's labeled as a paragraph. It's tagged, right? This is a tag-based language. So I'm going to save it, come here, and hit refresh. And look at this. Paragraphs are put onto their own lines. Very nice. So paragraphs tell the browser, put some space between things. There's other paragraphs here too. So I'll go here and put a paragraph here. This is going to be the start of a paragraph that's going to go all the way to here. So that's all one paragraph. I'll come back. This is a heading. I'll come back to that in just a second. And then I have one more paragraph down below here. Start the paragraph. Cut that, end it down here. So this is all another paragraph. Notice how when I highlight this, when I highlight it, I should be able to see a start tag and an end tag wrapping around. And it's saying this is a paragraph. Whatever is in that tag is marked up by the tag. The tag is a descriptor that says what that thing is. And I will once again save and reload the page. And we've got everything on different lines now. Very good. Now, if P is for paragraph, you might be able to guess what is for heading. So we have headings and paragraphs. P is for paragraph, H is for heading. And if we only had one kind of heading, we would simply just have H. But we have H1 through H6. These are different level headings. I'm going to start with H1. So H1 like this. And this is the first, oh, sorry, actually, I just realized that's not my H1. This is my H1. The H1 is the heading 1. It's the first level of heading. It's the most important heading. It's what the page is about. So this page is about, in this case, me, Dan Rodney. That's the main topic. So it is the first level, most important topic. And you will only typically have one of those because a page should be about one topic only. So you have one heading, one H1. Underneath that, you might have subtopics. So if I'm talking about Dan Rodney, I'm a trainer. I'm also a web developer, designer, and more. So those are two different things. One is a trainer, one is a web developer. Those are both subheadings. They are different topics. It's not that web developer is a subtopic to trainer. So they're both equal level headings, but they're subheadings to the main topic of Dan Rodney. So since they're a second level, they're in H2. H2 meaning that they are a subtopic to heading 1. So if you think about kind of like an outline, you have your main topics and then subtopics. And anytime you break down a topic into subtopics, you drop down a level. So you go from H1 to H2. If, for example, with the trainer part, if I was going to have the different areas of training, like web design, Adobe Creative Cloud, those would be H3s because they would be another level down in that main topic of I'm a trainer. But I'm a web developer, designer, more. It's on the same level as I'm a trainer. So it is also an H2 because it's a subtopic to Dan Rodney. So again, I wrap the start tag and end tag around that. And so the main topic is Dan Rodney. And the subtopics, multiple subtopics, are that I'm a trainer and I'm also a web developer, designer, and more. So this tells search engines, or it's good for accessibility as well. So screen readers can understand the topical outline of this. It's good for many reasons. And also just visually, I need to know what the main topics are and the subtopics. And automatically, with just default styling, there's a white background for the page with black text. There's a font chosen. These are all defaults. And if you don't like the defaults, you can change those with CSS, cascading style sheets. But by default, the heading 1 is the biggest. And then heading 2s are a little bit smaller. Heading 3s would be even smaller because they're meant to be subtopics. And so it's just a heading structure all the way from H1 down through H6. Most pages probably are going to have maybe H1, maybe H2, maybe 3. But you don't necessarily have to have all 6 different levels. It just depends on the topic structure that you're dealing with. So this is the fundamentals of HTML. You're going to go through and you're going to tag everything. There definitely are some more subtleties, like little things like, for example, at the top of the page, notice that these other pages, they have these nice titles at the top. But this just has a file name. So how do I get that nice little title up at the top? It's not here in the body of the web page. It's up at the top, up at the head of the page. Oh, I've got a head tag up here. Now, normally, as I said before, what goes on in the head is the thought process of the page. You normally don't see what goes on in the head, but there is one tag which you do see in the head, and that is the title tag. And the title tag is what you see in the tab bar of your browser. So this would be, let's say, Dan Rodney, instructor and web designer / developer. I'm going to save that file, come back to my browser, hit refresh, and look at that. Now I've got a nice title there. The title is important for multiple purposes. First of all, it is going to be bookmarked. If somebody bookmarks it, that's what they're going to see. You don't want people bookmarking index.html. But the most important reason that you want to have a good title is for search engines. So SEO is for search engine optimization. And we want to make sure that we have good language in there that tells Google and other search engines what our page is about. And so when you go to Google and you type in, well, let me give you an example here. I'm going to go to my personal live website here, danrodney.com. And my title up here is Dan Rodney, instructor, web developer, designer. Okay. Actually, let me go to the Mac page here. So this one is Mac Keyboard Shortcuts, the Ultimate Guide. Notice that in the page, it simply says Mac Keyboard Shortcuts. This is the heading 1. Up here, this is the title at the top. Now, they're probably going to share language. They're probably going to be very similar to each other. But like, for example, I put in the name of the website in the title, whereas I didn't have it here because I have a logo already over there. So remember that title, Mac Keyboard Shortcuts, The Ultimate Guide. Now let's go on to Google. Right? So we'll go to google.com and we're going to type in Mac Keyboard Shortcuts. So, of course, Apple does well. Looks like I'm falling in the ranking. I used to be up here. Oh, there I am. Okay. But look at that. Do you recognize that? That is my title, right? So the title is what you see in your tab bar up there. So your title is very important for attracting people in Google when they search for something. It should contain the same words as what they're searching. So it really conveys it like, hey, Google, that's what I'm about. And they searched for it. So hopefully they're going to see it and say, oh, that's what I'm looking for, right? The least important thing in your title is actually the name of your website. Certainly do not lead with it because people are not going to be searching typically for your website. They're going to be searching for the thing you offer on your website. So you look at all of these, and they will often have the website at the end, like Reader's Digest or Digital Trends, Computer World, but they all start with the topic that people are searching for. So, so that's why the title is important. Okay. In the presentation, going back to the presentation for just a second, if I continue the next slide, these are all the standard tags that you're going to have at a minimum in every single page. So we've got the HTML tag, we've got a head, we've got a body, we've got the title that's in there. Now there are a couple extra tags here that I didn't talk about, and a couple other attributes, which I also have not talked about just yet. So let me talk about attributes for just a moment. I'll start with the HTML element. So there's a language that we might want to specify to tell browsers that we are English or Espanol. So we have a language attribute that we can add. And you can put this to any HTML element. In this case, my whole page is English, but I could have one section of a page, like you could put this on paragraphs. There's also other divider tags that we'll see that you'll eventually learn. But you can put this language anywhere. In this case, my whole page is one language. So I'll just put it on the HTML. So everything's already in the HTML. This will just say everything is this one language. And the way that these attributes work is you have a tag, and after the tag name, you put a space, and then you start typing in your attribute. An attribute is kind of like a preference, or it's extra settings for something. Sometimes they're optional, sometimes they're required. In the case of language, it's optional. You don't have to put it in there. And I'll put EN for English. But if you're doing a Spanish page, you could say Español, so it would be ES. So there's different language codes for the different languages. And the format is always tag, space, you have your attribute equals some value in double quotes. All right. Now, there's also some other tags here, which I'm going to just copy and paste just for simplicity here, just so I save myself some typing. And I'm going to tab this in. The reason I'm going to hit tab there is just so that I can see the start and the head, the start and the end of my head a little bit easier. Doing things like typing in spaces and hitting tab never changes the display of the browser. As I mentioned earlier, having more than one space or hitting returns like I did here doesn't change the browser because the browser obeys tags. Tags tell it what to do. So hitting tab is just for us humans, because if everything is all lined here, it's harder to see the start and the end of something. Like, imagine all of this all being jumbled up with no spaces, no indentions. It's just hard to see where something starts and something ends. So by putting spaces around things, by hitting tab, we can format the code so it's easier for us to understand. So we see the start of the head and the end of the head, and that's separated from everything else. We don't have to put that in, but it just makes it easier for us to read. I'm going to paste in the code that I got from the presentation that I created. These two meta tags are additional information. Metadata is just information that goes along with the file. This thing right here, this says to use what's called Unicode. Unicode is a way of encoding Unicode, so one code for all platforms. It'll make sure that special characters like copyright symbols and smart quotes and M dashes, so any sort of special character like trademark symbols, copyright symbols, those things that might not normally display properly across all browsers, it makes sure that they're encoded to work properly across Mac and PC. So you want to make sure that you always have this in there to make sure your special characters get displayed properly. This also right here, I'm not going to go through and explain all of this in specific detail. I would normally do that in a longer class. But basically, in short, it just makes sure that all the different devices are appropriately rendered. It says that, hey, the thing you're looking at, the width is equal to the device width. And then it also doesn't scale in or out at all. It's just a normal 100% scale. The reason that this is important is because if you don't have this, the browser will actually think that you're a really old web page and that you're not what we call a responsive web page. A responsive web page is made to adapt to different screen sizes. So let's say a mobile phone, a tablet, and a desktop. So a responsive site will respond or change across different screen sizes. And you won't be able to see the difference of this on a desktop, but when you view this on a mobile device, if you don't have that, it's going to render your web page like a desktop on a mobile phone because it thinks you're a really old web page that was created in the days years ago when people only worked on a desktop. And you have to custom code your website to make it work properly on a mobile phone. Years ago, before mobile phones were invented, we didn't have responsive web design. We didn't worry about different screen sizes. There were just desktops. That's it. There were no tablets and phones. So this just makes sure that it's going to render properly on things like phones and tablets. You're still going to have to do other things that'll make it look good across devices, but this is necessary to make sure that it renders properly. And then finally, this little thing right up here, this is not a start and an end. This is just a single tag. And it's the very first tag because it says the kind of document that this is. There used to be long things here with like HTML4 and like a whole long address. HTML's gone through different versions, and browsers can render your page according to those different versions. The latest version that we're on, they went from HTML4, they went to HTML5. But HTML5, they didn't want to say we're HTML5 because what about 6 and 7? They didn't want to have to make you go back and update your code every single time a new version came out. So they just said, hey, we're just going to call the living standard. The living standard is just give us the latest, greatest HTML. Let's just make this little tag right here. Put it first before it renders any code at all, because we want to make sure that the moment it loads, the browser knows to render everything else according to the latest, greatest version of HTML, what's called the living standard. So hopefully, the idea of this is that we'll never have to change the document type ever again. We're just always opting into the latest way that web stuff can work. So when new technologies come out, we'll automatically be able to get them and use them in our web page without having to come back and change that document type. The browsers will automatically know to render them according to those latest standards. So you won't really see anything change with those things, but they are important as standard things. So whenever you're getting started, you can just take all this code right here, just copy and paste it in, and just change your title and throw in your content there. This is going to be the start of every web page that you do. But let me continue here in my page that I'm building here. And oh yeah, I got to go back to my tab here and hit refresh here. Technically a little bit of space was added there because of my document type, but what I don't have in here is I don't have my images, right? So I don't have my images. So how do I bring in my images? The images are going to be, let's put the photo right above this, because according to my design, if you remember, my design, I got my logo, then services, and then photo. So let's do right above, right between here, services that. So right here, let me make some space, and I'm going to bring in an image. So we got an image tag. Now an image tag does not have an ending tag. Even if you try to end it, it's not going to let you do that because there's nothing to put inside the image. You're not marking this up and saying, hey, these spaces, that's an image. That's not an image. Those are spaces. So the image tag is just an opening tag, and it will always have an attribute called source, src. It's the source file. What's the file? Where is it? They want to know. Inquiring minds want to know where that file is. So let me open up my Explorer over here again. Right now, I am sitting here in index.html. My image is in the images folder. So I have to tell it from how to get from here into the images folder. If the image that I want to find is home.jpg, what I can't do is just type in home.jpg, because it's not going to know where that is. I mean, I could try, but it's just not going to work. I'm going to get an error. It says, can't find that, because I did not tell it how to get to that file. So what I have to do instead is I have to say, hey, let's go into the images folder. Oh, look at that. Once I started typing, Visual Studio Code gives me some hints. I can use my arrow keys to go up and down with this, and I can hit return, and it auto-completes the name of the folder. Oh, look at this. Now it even shows me my files, and I can again use my up and down arrow keys, and then hit return to choose it. There we go. So now it knows to go from this index page, go into the images folder, and then find the home.jpg that's inside of that folder. Now that it knows how to find it, now I can save and reload, and it finds that image. Very nice. Let's do this once again for my logo. Up top here, it's still going to be in the body of my document here, but it's going to be above the paragraph for the nav bar there. Once again, I will do an image. See, now as I'm typing this out, I type in IM, and it's already on image. I can hit return, type in a space, S, R, and it goes to source, hit return. But before I forget, I'm just going to go there and I'm going to close that tag, because I don't know about you, but I can be forgetful. And if I get wrapped up in doing that source, I might forget to close that tag. So I like to close my tags before I forget. All right. So once again, I'm going to go into that images folder, start typing IM. There, look, it's already hinted that, so I can hit return. And I want the logo. There we go. I'm going to save that file, go back, and hit refresh. There we go. So those images are going to come in at the size you designed them. So that's one of the reasons why we design our files and export the graphics at the size we designed them. We don't just take some giant, huge image that's going to be a really big file size. It's going to take a long time to download. We optimize our images to the size we're going to use them in our web page. That way they download faster. Okay. So there's still some things I need to do for my design though. I don't have the right font. I don't have the right color. So I'm going to need to get some styling done. But I've got the content there. It's all text content that's in my page. I just need to style it. Also, it's wrapping too wide here in my design. I have more space on the left and the right hand side, and I have a narrower column there. So I want to fix all that stuff. So let's say next up I want to do my font styling. So let's see what font I want to use here. I'm going to select this text here, and we're just using plain old Arial. There are ways that you can use custom fonts in your design, and then also implementing this in your website. I'm not going to get into loading custom fonts here today. Just want to give you the overview, just enough that we can see how this page comes together. And I want to show you some CSS. So just kept it simple. Everybody has Arial on their computer, but it's something you need to consider. If they don't have the font, you can write the font name in your code, but if they don't have it installed on their computer, the font isn't there, and it's not going to use that. But I know everybody should have Arial. So we're going to say Arial, and then it's 15 pixels. So let's just say everything in the page is going to get Arial, and we'll start with 15. So I need to write some CSS, some cascading style sheets. And for right now, just to keep it simple, I'm going to just put it in this page. Normally, you're going to create a separate file and share it with the whole website, but I'm just going to keep it simple. And this stuff goes up in the head. It's something the page thinks about, but you don't see the code being output onto the page. You'll see the effect of it, but you're not going to see it directly output onto the page. So up here, I'm going to create a new style tag. And once I have the style tag, in that style tag, I'm no longer writing HTML. I'm now writing CSS, which is a companion language which works with HTML. And it's going to refer to HTML. For example, I can say every paragraph, so P P refers to the paragraph tag. Now I'm not using less than or greater than brackets because I don't want to create a paragraph. I want to style it. Then I'm going to put a set of curly brackets. Those curly brackets are going to house all of the settings for a paragraph. So I'm creating a style for paragraphs. And as I did this, all I had to do was type in my left left curly bracket. And boom, it created both. Because I'm in a code editor, it knows to type both. When I hit return, it formats them nicely with indentation so that I can put all the settings that I want to say for a paragraph, like the font size. So I'm going to type in font, and look, it auto-completes all the CSS properties that you can do. So I'm going to say font size. The font size, as I see over here in my design, is 15 pixels. So now it'll make all my font sizes 15 pixels. The color over here, I can go to my color, I can click on that, and here is the code equivalent of that color. I'm going to copy that, and then I can go back here and say color and paste in that color. Now, for those colors, those require a hashtag. Hashtag is, these are called hex codes, and they're going to be a series of 6 numbers or letters that are going to be there. So notice the format of these. We have the property, then we have a colon, and then we have the value, and then we have a semicolon. This is how all of your CSS properties are going to be written. The property name, colon, value, semicolon. We need that semicolon because technically you can write multiple of these on the same line. How would it know when one value is done and the next property starts? So even though we like to write them on different lines because it's easier for us humans to read this, the browser doesn't care. So the semicolon is always necessary to end one property and value and go on to another property and value. And I'm going to save that file, come back to the browser and hit refresh and watch all the paragraphs. All the paragraphs just became the size and color that I want. Now they're not the right font that I want, and they're also not the correct line height as well. So this line height here, and they even call it line height over here, as opposed to leading like they do in print design apps. This is called line height here. So that was 28. So let me do my line height here. Line height is 28 pixels. And when I save that, come back here to my browser and hit reload, now there's more space between them. Good. So now let's take care of that Arial font. And it doesn't matter the order that you put these things in, by the way. You can put them in any order. So font family. They even give you a list of suggested font stacks. The reason we call it a font stack here is because you're giving him a first choice, a second choice, and a third choice, or you can have as many choices as you want. Why do we give them choices? Well, what if they don't have Arial installed on their computer or their phone? Now, they should. Everybody should have Arial. But as another example, what if I was using the font called Hobo? It's a custom font, and I might have Hobo installed on my computer. In my browser, I might see it in Hobo. But if other people don't have Hobo installed, they're not going to see it. It won't be the first choice on their computer. It'll go to the second choice. Maybe that works on mine, but it doesn't work on theirs. So I'm giving it first, second, third, and so on choice. So everybody should have Arial, but just in case they don't, it'll be Helvetica. And if they don't have Arial or Helvetica, at least as a category, it'll be some type of sans serif typeface. As opposed to the serif typeface that it is right now. It's actually Times Roman by default. So I can hit refresh, and all the paragraphs now, not the headings, but the paragraphs, are all that same font that I want them to be. So my paragraphs are now styled. I could do the headings next. Now remember, I have two types of headings. I have a heading 1 and a heading 2. So in this style list, I'm going to just create a set of styles. And it doesn't matter the order here, but I just think of H1 would come first, and then an H2 would come underneath that, and then a paragraph would come underneath that. So just in terms of organizing my list of styles, I like to just put my headings from kind of biggest to smallest, and then my paragraph last. But the order does not matter. You could rearrange these if you want to. I just think it's a logical order for finding my code later. And then I can have my font family here for both of these. So now all the headings and all the paragraphs are going to all be the same font, like so. Now, if you think that that's repetitive and wondering, hey, is there a way that I wouldn't have to specify that 3 different times? That's a good question. You actually could. All of my content is in the body tag. So if everything is in the body tag, I can style everything that's in the body. So with body, if I put this here, I say everything that's in the body gets that font. And I wouldn't have to put it on all of these different sections. I could just put it once and everything in the body will get that. So now putting that code once instead of 3 times, it makes it easier, and now everything in the body gets that. Now, there's going to be different font sizes for the heading 1 and heading 2s, so I can reference my design, and I can see, okay, the heading 1 is 25, so I could do font size is 25, and the heading 2 is 21 over here, so font size 21. Do my different sizings there, and when I come back and hit refresh, now all my sizings are correct. Very nice. The heading 1 is the last one I need to fix. I need to get the color, so I can copy that color there. Remember that in your code, when you're doing this, you need to put in the hashtag before you paste that. All right, that's the code equivalent to that. And now that's the right color. The last thing I'm missing is that in my design, I made that all caps, and I want to style that as all caps in my web page. So that is called a text transform. Now, let me back up a second. I know that that's called text transform, but that's not very intuitive. Text transform. Let's say you know how to do a targeting of an HTML element like we've done, and you know how to set a CSS property and value. What if you don't know how to do something? Google is a wonderful thing. Sometimes people say, well, is there a book or something that I can read or check things out? The reference, or like, is there a website I can go to? Yes, there's a wonderful website called Google. It is amazing. So I could type in CSS, and I want to make it all caps. I'm going to click the first thing. CSS all caps. Oh, look at that. Text transform uppercase. So I'm just going to copy that. Come back here, paste it in, and notice property value. Oh, look at that. Save that, come back, hit refresh, and there we go. So the nice thing is, once you understand the syntax, if you forget a specific property or specific value, Google's wonderful. You can always look those things up. If you haven't used it in a while, you forgot about it, you don't know it. But notice how I looked up, and even in the case of all caps, it didn't even say all caps, it said uppercase, but still probably somebody's written a blog article or something where you're going to see that. A lot of times you'll end up on either Mozilla Developer Network, W3 Schools, or Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow, or CSS Tricks, also another great place. But I don't go to those websites directly. I Google it, and then I just see where Google takes me. And a lot of times, you will quickly be able to find the answer for these things. So my webpage is almost done. Really the last big thing that I haven't done yet here is to center all the stuff with the space on the left and the right. Like, I don't want all this text going all the way out there. I want the text to be the same width as the image. So I want to make it the same width as that image. And let's take a look at that image over here. I'm going to go and click on the image. And down here at the bottom, it actually says the whole image is 720 by 330. So it's saying that down here at the bottom of my window. So that's 720 pixels. And I made the 2 photos that I have the same size, 720 pixels wide. It's the width that I care about, because everything in this page, everything, I want to set a width of 720 pixels so that it's not wider than that. Now, actually, I have to come back and make a little tweak to this. This is, I want to show you a problem with hard coding a width in here. But let me just save that and hit refresh. And look, there we go. It's not too wide. That's good. Now, there's a couple problems. First of all my space is to the right. I want it evenly spaced out on the left and the right. If you remember my design, if I zoom out and see the whole thing, zoom to fit, I had my design equals space on the left and the right. So that's what I want to do on my page. The other problem, which is actually a bigger problem, is that when I resize my browser window, I have hard-coded that it must be exactly 720. It can't be more and it can't be less, which means that on smaller screens, they're going to be forced to scroll, and that's not good. I don't want to force them to scroll. So I want something that can be flexible in size. So I really shouldn't have typed in width, which is an exact width. I should have said maximum, max width. So a max width says that's the biggest, the maximum it could be, but it can be less. So now when I refresh the page, it's still, that's the biggest it can be. But when I go smaller, notice the text. Now the photos still, that's got an issue there, but the text, see how the text reflows? That's good. At least I fixed the text. The image is not scaling because images don't scale automatically by default. How do I get an image to scale? Well, I want all my images to scale. So I'm going to say image, which is going to target my image tags. Remember that these things right now, the way we're doing them, is targeting tags. There are other ways you could target things, but I'm targeting this image tag. So IMG there, IMG here. That's what makes the connection to say find image tags. Now, I'm going to do another mistake here. I'm going to say width 100%. Now, that will make things 100% of whatever they're inside of. When I do that, my logo scales up. So this will either scale up or down to fill the container that they're sitting inside of. Now, it does fix my photo, but I don't really want a width, a hard-coded width where they have to scale up or down. Once again, I want that maximum. The biggest it can be is 100. It's okay if they're smaller, they just can't be bigger than their container. So that's going to mean that that image doesn't force itself to scale up, right? It just says the biggest it can be is 100% of the thing that they're inside of. And now as the body gets smaller than 720, that's fine. Once it hits 720, that's a maximum size. And this image width is always relative to the thing it's inside of. Since it's inside of a body, which has a max width, it'll be whatever the width of the body is. So the last thing is just to center this, and then this web page is done. Now, granted, only I can see it. The next part will be I have to share this with other people by uploading it to a website. But let's center this on the page. So we need to talk about spacing for a second. Now, with spacing, there are two types of spacing. There's space inside of a box and space outside of a box. These two types of spacing are called padding and margin. Padding is space inside of a box. Think about if you're shipping something out, you're putting it by UPS or FedEx or something, you're going to make a box. Where are you going to put the padding? You're going to put the padding on the outside of the box, putting bubble wrap on the outside. UPS guy is going to look at you really strange if you put the bubble wrap on the outside of the box. No, you put the padding on the inside of the box. So on the body, if I put padding, that's going to put padding inside the box. And that's going to put more space all around the content there, which can be nice when I'm on smaller screens. I might like a little bit more space than they had by default. There was a little bit of space there, but that was actually the page margins that we're going to get rid of in just a second. So let me bring that back because I actually like that padding. I like to have a little bit of space inside the box, but there's space outside the box. And so the space that's outside the box, which is all this. So imagine the box ends at 720. And then what goes beyond that, that space outside the box, that is margin. So let me actually get rid of this padding for a second. Let's say I zero out the margin and I get rid of it. There's actually, the body has some page margins by default. There's a little bit there. I think it's like 8 pixels or something, 6 pixels, somewhere around there. So if I zero it out, that gets rid of it. That was the space that was there. I can add some padding back in, but what that does is that just removes it there. But when the width ends, there's just leftover space there. That's still technically considered margin, but the width of the body ends, and then there's just like empty margin out there. I want to balance the left and right margins. So what I want to do is I want to say that let's say the top The top can be 0. The bottom can be 0. And then the left and right, so margin left and right, is going to be auto. I'm going to copy and paste that. And by doing the left and the right, the left and the right are automatically done, which means it's going to balance them out. It just says, oh, take all that extra space that's on the left and the right and just automatically do it. The reason I would do top and bottom being 0 would be because when we get down to a smaller screen size, there's no margins anymore. There's none at the top or the bottom because I zeroed out the top and bottom, but also on the left and the right, it has to be auto, which I need for that bigger screen size. So to bring back the space that I want on the smaller screens, I would add some padding, space inside the box. You're not going to see it on the desktop, but you will see it on the smaller mobile phones. By the way, you don't have to spell out all 4 sides. You can just simply say margin auto when you want to do this. And if you simply say auto margin, then it takes care of your auto margins, which basically are top and bottom 0 and left and right auto. I just like to spell it out just so you kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes. And there we got something that looks nice, that only I can see, and I only have 1 page. So let me save this page as to make a second page and then upload it so the site goes live. So I'm just going to do a save as. Do a save as, and I'm going to give this a second name. See now, index, that's your home page. This other page, I can name whatever I want. So I'm going to make a contact page. Now, if I was making a contact us page, remember what I said before? Don't use spaces in your file names. Use a dash or an underscore, preferably a dash. So, but I'm just going to keep it simple, just contact. On this other page, this is going to be the contact Dan Rodney page. So it's going to have a unique title. So that if people bookmarked it, it would have a unique title. If people searched it, it would have a unique title. On the page itself, it's also going to have the heading that's on the page. I also have a contact JPEG as well. So I'm going to switch out to be the other photo. And then I don't need all of this text here, so I'll get rid of these paragraphs and headings. And then this one, I don't even need a subheading. I'll just say contact. And then this one will be, please email me. I am lonely. I always make that joke there. Now I want to open this up in the browser there. So let me right click on this. I've installed a little extension here that allows me to open it up in a browser. So this little extension here, by the way, is in VS Code. There's extensions that you can look at. And this extension is called, it's not live preview, it is, where is it? Preview in browser. Open in browser, there we go. So, so if you search here for open in browser, you'll have a little install button that you can click, and once you install that little extension here into Visual Studio Code, you can just right click on that and say open in default browser, and that'll open up, which is a really quick way to open up a web page. Don't forget you can also drag and drop into your browser as well. So here I have my second page. The sad thing is, though, there's no way to get between them. So I need a way to get between the contact and the home page. So how do I do that? Let's go back to the home page. So somebody comes to the home page, they want to be able to click the word contact to go to the contact page. So I need to wrap an anchor tag around this. A is for anchor. And just think of like a chain anchor, like a boat that has a chain and an anchor, and you kind of anchor yourself to another page. I don't know, that's the metaphor they came up with. There's not a link tag for this because link is used for something else, to link the page to other assets. So A is for anchor. Anchor tags will always have an href. We are writing hypertext markup language, HTML, hypertext markup language. We are now making a hypertext reference. We're referencing another page of hypertext. So, as I said before, you'll have your tag, you'll have a space, your attribute, equals a value in quotes. And in here, you're going to put the name of the other page that you're linking to. And if there's any folders that you have to go, it would be folder slash, just like we did here, folder slash, and then the file name. So the thing that you see inside of the anchor tag is what you'll see in the page. The href is where you're going to go when you click what's inside. And what's in there can be anything you want, text, images, anything. I'm going to save that. And let's go back to our homepage here, hit refresh. Oh, look at that. It's now colored and got an underline. I can click it. And, oh, silly. I linked to the wrong page. I'm on the index and I have to link to the contact page. Sorry, wrong link there. There we go. Now I click it, I go over there. Now from here, I want to go back home. So let's go to the contact page. And as I said, you can wrap a link around anything. So like the logo, I can wrap an anchor tag around the logo. They can be on different lines. They can be on the same line. It doesn't matter. But you always have an href. I'm on the contact page and I want to go home, which is index. So now I want to do index. I just got ahead of myself before. Whatever is inside the href, the anchor tag, is what you're going to see, the thing that you click, and it'll go to that page. So now I can save. I can hit reload. So now I can click the logo, click here, and I made a little website that only I can see. Because even though it's in a web browser, it's a file on my computer. Nobody else can see this file. I need to now share it with other people. So how do you do that? The way you do that is you've got to get some web hosting. Now, there are lots of web hosts out there. I don't want to recommend a specific web host, but let's just say, for example, Bluehost. Tons of people use Bluehost. It's a big one, just so I can use it as an example. You can go here to hosting. A lot of people will use something like shared hosting. And let's say you choose one here, the basic plan. Now, always be careful of the intro pricing. Look at the normally. So this price is an intro price. All of these companies, and pretty much all of them do this, they give you an intro cheap price. It will go up to a normal, auto renews at regular rates. I mean, they're not hiding it, but don't think that that's your forever rate. So the regular rate, which sometimes they make that a little bit harder to find there, but you can look through, like if you pay it month to month, it's more. If you renew for a year, you save. If you renew it for 2 years, you save. So depends on what how long you're going to get your website for, as to how cheap you're going to get it. Always, typically, when you renew for a longer period, when you lock in and prepay, you're going to save some money if you prepay. The only thing is then you're locked into that host. So expect somewhere around like $10 a month or so for kind of a normal, kind of cheaper host. Not the $3 a month. You'll pay more than that. This plan is good for one website. If you want more than one website, then you could pop up and pay just a little bit more, and you can have as many websites on here as you want. Now, there's two parts to making a website. There's your web hosting, which they will provide, but the other thing is that you're going to need a domain name. Now, some plans are going to include a free domain name, but only for a year. The domain name is your .com, .net, .io, .org, whatever your domain name is. So the domain name is your internet address. Gmail.com, Apple.com. All of these are these .coms, .ios, .orgs, .nets, whatever. Those are all called domain names. And you pay yearly for those. So if anybody gives you a free one, it's typically only going to be the first year. And then after that, you're going to have to pay, and that's a separate charge. Typically anywhere from like $10 to $20 a year, not per month, a year. So they're not very expensive because it's just an internet address. They don't store files. Whoever is storing your domain name, they don't actually store files or anything. They just make the website work. It's the host, the web hosting plan, the one that is like the $10 a month. They're the ones that actually store the files. And these could be the same company, or they could be different companies. For example, you could use Namecheap.com or some other company or like GoDaddy to do the domain name, but use somebody else to do the hosting. It's going to be easiest if you sign up with one company and do everything with that one company, especially for your first website, because otherwise you have to connect the domain name to the web host, which gets more complicated. But technically speaking, there can be different companies. That's why domain names are charged separately. It's not a scam or anything. They're not trying to trick you, because they can't know whether you're going to get a domain from them or not. You might get that domain name from somebody else. You might have already had it, and you want to use them for hosting. So hosting and domain name charges are separate. They always are. They always will be. So, but just expect that for the first year, you might get an intro rate. You might get a free domain name for the first year, but you will have to pay that $10 or $20 per year, every year, forever, as long as you want to have that domain name, plus your web hosting as well. So domain name is the cheapest part, 10, 20 bucks a year. You're hosting somewhere around 10 to 20-ish, somewhere around that range per month. And typically that's if you're going to prepay for the year. If you're paying month to month, it's going to be even more expensive if you're just paying month to month. So whatever, whether you want to get one website, multiple websites, you sign up with a plan depending on your needs. You sign up for the hosting, and once you signed up for the host, if it's a brand new domain name, it's going to take a little bit to get that going. It might not be done the second you sign up. Domain names take a little while to get created and to do something called propagate out over the internet. Propagate means to just go out and be known over the internet. So brand new domain names do take a little bit. Used to be days we'd have to wait. Now it's normally just a matter of minutes or just a couple hours or something. It's normally pretty quick these days. So they'll get your domain name, assuming it's available, and set up your hosting account for you, and you can log in. And when you log in, there's going to be probably what's called a cPanel. A cPanel is a control panel. And in there, you can look up to see your what's called FTP accounts. And you can either create one, or there might be already one defined there. If you're not sure where to find those or how it works, contact your customer support and just say, I want to create an FTP account, or see if there is an FTP account in my account. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. Just a fancy way of saying copy files over the internet. So once you log into your account, you can look up that FTP info, the FTP users in your cPanel, and find out. And if there's not one already there, you can create one for yourself to be able to upload to your site. Now, once you create that, that's going to give you a username and a password and an address. And you're going to use that with an FTP application. And there's a lot of these out here. I like CyberDuck. Cyberduck.io. Now, the only thing I don't like about CyberDuck is their website has way too many ads. And don't be installing. Oh, I hate Google with a passion when they allow people to put in install buttons or download buttons in ads. I feel like there should never be an ad that has an install or a download button, because it tricks people. So that's just something to be careful of when you're going to CyberDuck. It's a great app. There's no ads built into it. It's fine, but it's just the website has it. This is the download button you're going to click. Do not click whatever's there. Do not click whatever's there. When you click this, you're also going to see an ad. I don't know what that ad's going to be. Don't click install or download there. Close the ad to go to the download page. Or better yet, just go to cyberduck.io/download to bypass that. These are the official download buttons. If you click anything anywhere else, I do not know what you're going to get, and most likely it will not be anything good. But if you click these buttons, you will be fine. You can download it. It's a free app. It's great. Just make sure you get the official proper download buttons and not ads. All right. So I've already downloaded that, put it up here. And in here, we're going to open a connection. Now, this is going to connect to your website. So I'm going to open a connection, and this server username and password. The server is your FTP address you're going to get from your web host. Normally, it's going to be ftp.yourwebsite.com, whatever that is. For today, we're going to use a website called the Jive Factory, just for demonstration purposes. So thejivefactory.com, the server for it is FTP, for File Transfer Protocol, fancy way of saying copy files over the internet, .thejivefactory.com. Now, before I go there, let's just go to the website itself and go to thejivefactory.com. This is a fictitious place. It's not a real place. Don't try to go there. Don't know what's actually at this location. So we go to the website. I don't want to replace the homepage of this. We use this for classes to demonstrate certain things. I don't want to replace this. So I made a subfolder on here, a Rockstar folder. So I'm going to go to /Rockstar. And I uploaded this earlier just to say, hey, hope you're enjoying this. I'm going to replace this page with the website that I built. And just ignore that I'm in a subfolder here. That's just because I didn't want to have to purchase a whole domain name just for this demonstration. So we're reusing a domain name that we already have. Like I said, hosting costs monthly and domain names cost yearly. So already paying for this one. So we're just getting more use out of it just for this demonstration. But everything's going to work the same way. Just pretend that it doesn't have /Rockstar on. All right, so I'm going to replace this page right now with the website that I made. And the way that I'm going to connect to it is through the FTP application, in this case, CyberDuck. But there are other apps out there, like FileZilla is a popular one. I like CyberDuck. I just like the interface. I think it's simpler and nicer to use. The username and password, that's going to be defined in your web host. So when I said you're going to go to your cPanel and you're going to go to FTP users and see if there's been one already defined or if you can create your own, this is where you're going to put in the username and password of your FTP user. So in our case, we're rockstar at thejivefactory.com. Jivefactory.com. And I've already typed this in before, so my computer remembers my password, so I don't have to enter it in again. I'll connect over the internet, and that's going to connect into my live website. This index.html is the page that you're seeing here in the browser. All this website is a folder sitting on a computer somewhere. And this FTP app just connected me into that folder. If I delete this file, I'm literally deleting that page. Ignore the CGI bin. That's just kind of an old technology that a lot of people don't use anymore. So we're just going to completely ignore that that exists. Just pay attention to the page. For example, I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to delete it. I'm going to delete it. Yes, I want to delete it. Now that that file's not there, I'm going to go back and hit refresh and boom, that file's gone. I just deleted it. That's how quick and easy access. Oh, see the little cPanel? Remember how I said about cPanel does stuff on your website? It's how you control your website. So the cPanel is giving you a little message saying, hey, sorry, that file just doesn't exist and there's nothing to see here, basically. That's okay. I'm going to go back to CyberDuck. I now have an empty folder. Oh, now that empty folder, that's going to match up with the website folder. Remember how I said you put everything in a folder? So all these files that I created on my computer, I want to get all of those over to the web server. So I'm just going to select these from my desktop and just drag them into the FTP app. If there was already a file there, it would say, do you want to overwrite it? And you would say yes. Oh, there we go. It's all done. Now what happens when I go back to the browser and hit refresh? Boom, there's my website. Available to see. If any of you are actually watching this live right now, for those of you that are, you can actually go there right now and see this page. For anybody watching the recording, we do delete this eventually. So this might not be there as of the recording date that you're watching this, but those that are live can see this now. So you can actually see the website. And I can click on it, go to the other page, go back. I just made an actual working website. And the cool thing is that you get to update this instantly whenever you want to. Now, this is a copy. The copy that's on the website, the website's just a folder of files. So this was a cool thing. Once I realized this, I'm like, oh, wait. So I just have a folder on my computer and a folder on their computer, and I just develop it locally, and then when I'm done, I upload it, and then it's live. Like, that's pretty awesome. I still remember the first time when I built a website on my own and uploaded it, and I just dragged it up there and hit refresh, and I was like, I built that. Like, it's a cool feeling to know that if you just make the right files, name them the right way, put in the right code and upload it, like, this is like the democratization of technology. Like, this is something that people want to learn to do it. You can make your own website, and you don't have to be some millionaire to make a website. Like $10, it's like $10 a month. You can have a website going, and it's a pretty awesome thing that you have the power to build your own websites. Now, let's say I make a change in the future. So this contact page, let's say I'm not lonely anymore, and I want to make a change. Keep in mind that I have two versions of my website. I have the one that's on my computer and the one that's on the website. So the one that I'm looking at in Visual Studio Code, that's the one that's on my computer. So if I go to the contact page and then I say, please send work, I had a child. Trying to keep this a little lighthearted and fun here. Do you think that updated the website? No, didn't update the website. Updated my file on my computer. I can still preview it in my browser and make sure it's good, but notice that's a file address. It's not the live website. So, and I can go to the live website and I can hit refresh, but that's still the old version. But that's a good thing, because I can do my coding locally on my machine, make sure it works, make sure I didn't mess anything up. I know that's a simple change, but let's say it's a more complex change. You're doing coding, you're adding things. You want to make sure it's good first before you upload it, because what you don't want to do is be messing up your website live in front of people viewing your website. So you want to make sure it's good locally on your computer, and once it's all good, then you just re-upload it. So you have your CyberDuck, which is your live web server. You have your computer here, your local files, and I only changed contact. So that's the only file I need to re-upload. So I'll re-upload that by just dragging it up there. Now, that already exists. So it says, do you want to overwrite it? Yes, I do. Continue. And there we go. So now when I go to my live website here and hit refresh, now the website has been updated. Pretty cool. So I hope that has been a good overview for you of just kind of the general idea of how a website works, how it functions. I know that, at least for me, seeing it makes it much more understandable than just hearing about it. If I just talk about the role of HTML and CSS, I hope that this now makes more sense. Obviously, there's a lot more HTML and CSS, and of course, you can also learn JavaScript. There's a lot more things to learn. Learning a design app like Figma or Adobe XD or something like that. At Noble Desktop, we teach courses either live online that you can attend, or you can attend in New York City if you happen to be there. There's links here that you can go check out for more information about our web design classes. We have certificate programs, which are kind of a collection of classes on HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So if you want to get into front end, where you're focusing on HTML, JavaScript for front end in-browser stuff, you can do that, or you can do full stack, which is going to do all the front end plus do back end stuff. So if you want to get into heavier development using JavaScript on the back end, something called the MERN stack, which is Mongo, Express, React, and Node, you can get into full stack, which is front end and back end. Web design is a little bit of a different focus, because front end and full stack are just coding, but web design also includes design in there as well. And if you want to compare them, this link is good just to compare them, just to see what's included in the front end versus the back end, which is JavaScript. So JavaScript is back end. Full stack is both front and back end. And then the web design. So like web design, for example, gets into the graphics. So like Adobe XD for doing graphics. We went with Adobe XD at least at this point, just because a lot of people have it from their Creative Cloud. But you could also, if you wanted to, you could swap that out with Figma if you wanted to, or Sketch. And then also the visual design, which is the design thinking. So basically we get into the design part in the web design. If you're just interested in coding, the other certificates, front end, JavaScript, and full stack, are just pure coding certificates. But if you want to do design and code, we have the web design certificate. If you're more interested in just purely design, you're not interested in the code at all, we do also have some other certificates, like, for example, UX UI, which is purely focusing on just design, doesn't get into any coding at all. So that's also another option. So I hope this has been useful for you. Just as a reminder, at the very first slide, so I'm going to hit my home button on my keyboard. The very, very first slide is there's a link to download the PDF. So You can download that PDF. This is all the step-by-steps to do the coding that I did today. You can go through this exercise, and there's the link to download the class files, and you can go through all of this step-by-step. It has you do all the coding. Previewing in the browser tells you how to do all that stuff, and you could do the HTML, the CSS. It's all step-by-step if you want to follow through an exercise, just for practice. Yeah, if you want to start to actually get practice doing some coding. So I hope this has been useful for you, and that you've enjoyed this webinar, and hope to see you again in the future in either one of these free webinars that we do, or in one of our classes or certificate programs. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.